Hey everybody, this is Perch. Have you ever heard the term FOC? What does it mean? Why does it matter for comics? Well, the term stands for Final Order Cutoff, and it's a pretty important date. In fact, in many cases, from a retailer perspective, it's one of the most important dates, but it also matters to you as a customer. So let me kind of explain the basics of what Final Order Cutoff is. And I welcome any retailers who want to come in and correct certain aspects or add details more to the point, because there's a little bit of misunderstanding about what this term is. There's been some very inaccurate videos put out that kind of describe what it is. So I'm going to talk about it more from the perspective of you're a retailer and you've got this Final Order Cutoff, and what does it mean? So the way to kind of break it down is that there are three real dates that you need to worry about. As a retailer, there's the initial solicitation, and that's where, if you've been coming to this channel and you see me go through, here are all the comics that are out there, and here's the whole mass of everything that you can order. And you have books from Marvel and DC, you have trade paperbacks, you have monthlies, you have the whole batch of comics. That's the initial solicitation. That information goes out. Retailers can go in, key in their orders, and basically save it, and that's providing them this estimate back to the publishers about what kind of print run they want to do, and it's basically the initial view of what these comics are going to look at. And usually this comes, like, for example, we're looking at February right now. It is obviously the middle of November. So if you think about it, you got mid-November to mid-December to mid-January to then February. So your solicitations are usually about 2.5 months ahead of street date. And once upon a time, it was further out than that. I think, and maybe my memory may be getting me wrong here, but in the 90s, I want to say that we were in the 3 to 4 month zone, and now we're in the, it's tightened up a little bit. In this case, that's a good thing, because generally, you don't want to be ordering so far in advance of receiving the actual product in store that things change, that creators become more or less popular, or any number of things. So you want to try and move it as close as you can from order to release. And then the next term I want to talk about is at the end of the process, and that's the release date or the street date. And that's basically when you as a retailer are allowed to sell that comic. Now, typically speaking, comic shops get their comics in boxes prior to release date. Now, why do they do that? Well, they do that so that people can take the comics out of the box, put it in the various pull boxes, put it up on the shelf, everything else, but you're not allowed to sell it. And I don't think this is a surprise to anyone else, but this exists for everything. Like the PlayStation 5, which is a very hot console this holiday season. Many of the PlayStation 5 devices were actually delivered to places like Walmart and Target and others, days before they were allowed to sell them. Now, you might ask yourself, and people have, hey, once you get it in stock, why not just sell it? Why not immediately sell it? Well, because you want to do some coordination. You want to have your marketing and your commercials, and you want to also make it fair so that everybody knows the date. So you don't have customers just going into the store every day saying, is it in yet? Is it in yet? Is it in yet? That they know that Friday is going to be the day. It allows the store to prepare. It allows the marketing to roll and the advertisements. It allows the customers to be unified around a date. And that's what's going on with comics as well. Now, there's a whole other video to be made about, now that DC can technically sell, their street date is one day earlier than everybody else's, and why that irritates comic shops and everything else, but we'll get into that another day. So we have the solicitation, which happens about 2.5 months ahead, and then we have the release date, which is your street date, and then in the middle of that is this thing called Final Order Cutoff. So what is Final Order Cutoff? Well, at its most basic level, Final Order Cutoff is a time, it's a moment where the retailers can go in and adjust their orders. They can reduce what they're ordering, or they can increase what they're ordering. And usually, the Final Order Cutoff is, a couple weeks before the street date, roughly. It's kind of this last second before the publishers then set their final print runs, and off it goes. So you're basically, if Final Order Cutoff, for example, there was one on Monday of this week, so November 16th, and you were able to place your Final Order Cutoff through Previews World, and you were able to do that for things like Commanders in Crisis #3. Now, we just got Commanders in Crisis #2. So this is, roughly speaking, about 4 weeks ahead or so of when the street date is supposed to happen. So, for example, there is a Marvel omnibus for Aliens, which is reprinting a bunch of the old Dark Horse material, and that's coming in December. And the Final Order cutoff is, right now. Basically, no, I take it back. Actually, those orders are being due on the 23rd. So that's more or less kind of what you're in for. It's a chance for you to revise your order. And now, why would you want to do that? Well, maybe you got a lot more excitement for this title that you didn't know you were going to get. Maybe something changed and the world got more exciting. For example, Final Order Cutoff, I'm just looking at the screen right now, of November 23rd for these orders being due for Wolverine #8. And Wolverine #8 is coming out here in a couple weeks. And so it's a chance for you to say, well, during Ten of Swords, things were slowing down a little bit, and now they're coming up. The other way that sometimes publishers will offer some incentives to say, if you order more of a title, then you'll get more variant covers, or it's a way to actually adjust what it is that you're doing to hopefully kind of catch the popularity of a title coming up, to maybe qualify for a variant cover that you didn't know you were going to get. Or maybe it's an opportunity for you to sell something that maybe you didn't. You need more time to get your customers to get excited about a comic, about a variant cover, and you didn't know yet, when. You didn't know how many you were going to order, so now you need to adjust your orders. So it's basically a way to get kind of some last minute adjustments to your order before you commit to them. Now, why did they do this in the first place? Well, there was a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit against Marvel at one point from retailers around kind of just lateness and penalties. It was very one directional. So there weren't returnable comics available, but comics were late. And in many cases, customers would order something and then a creative team would shift, or it would be so late that the interest had died in the comic, but the retailers are stuck with it anyway. And that's where Final Order Cutoff came in. It was a way to kind of close that window to about 30 days, roughly, a little bit more than that, so that retailers are given another chance to amend their orders with more accurate, more timely information. It's not foolproof. Certainly, we have seen creative teams get shift anyway, kind of last minute. We've seen titles get moved in and out of events and other things. And it's a case where then you start the whole second printing, third printing process and other things. But it's when people talk about, hey, Final Order Cutoff is generating more interest in this comic, that's what they're talking about. It's like, well, maybe this book Crossover by Donny Cates is a good example where it's like, oh, a Donny Cates book, that's exciting and everything else. But then Donny Cates himself starts doing a bunch of marketing and promotion on social media for his book. It gets a lot more interest than when the book was initially solicited. And so you see a bunch of retailers going in and upping their orders. Or maybe in other cases, the retailers get a lot more people requesting it to be added to their pull box than they were expecting. And so they need to up their orders to accommodate it. So that's what Final Order Cutoff is. Now, here's where it goes wrong. It goes wrong on two fronts. Number one, despite the fact that Final Order Cutoff is a huge opportunity for retailers to basically do some last-minute promotion and get more interest into books, few do. They typically just have the creators just do that job for themselves, and they do very little to actually work Final Order Cutoff. And in many cases, those dates and that information around when Final Order Cutoff is happening, for example, the new issue of Wolverine coming out in December, Final Order Cutoff will be on the 23rd. So that's on Monday. So the fact that Monday is your last date to do this is usually not well distributed. And by the way, this would be as simple as the publishers proactively creating a mailing group to retailers and sending them an email couple days before going, hey, just to remind you, Final Order Cutoff is Monday for these books. Now, Diamond does a bit of this, to be clear, and Diamond tries, but this is a case where you can't beat up on Diamond because a lot of this information around what books to hype really should come from the publishers, and they do a very uneven job of doing it. The creators, you see in particular, I know Matt Rosenberg is somebody who's always pushing, remember Final Order Cutoff, and creators themselves who have books going from Image will definitely push it because it's in their best interest to get those extra sales. But Final Order Cutoff is not always about adding; it can also be about removing. So if interest is lower, it allows you a chance to take some books off that you know you're not going to sell. So one other item to cover with Final Order Cutoff, and here's where it gets a little bit murky in the sense that the rules are not clearly stated and seem to be applied somewhat, all over the place. And it's basically that not every publisher gets Final Order Cutoff as an option, or rather, not every store gets Final Order Cutoff for every publisher. You have to be a premium publisher, and this would be your DC, well, back when they were with Diamond, Marvel, and some others. IDW, I believe, has it. There's a few that do have it, but you have to be a premium publisher. Image, of course, has it. But here's why it's screwy: is that if you are a retailer, you've got to kind of keep track then of which comics are Final Order Cutoff and which aren't. And in some cases, the books that need the help the most, i.e., the indies, the ones that are really just up and coming, they don't have that security net. They don't have that ability to kind of get that extra promotion time, which means you're 12 to 8 weeks out of having to make that decision as a shop. And if you're, a small publisher and you're trying to really generate a lot of hype, you have to do it 2.5 months early, or you have to really struggle to get that Final Order Cutoff. So it's a weird system. And like I said, it's not completely well defined in how it's done. But it winds up being pretty bad for somebody trying to get their book going, because you either take maybe a worse deal with a bigger publisher, so you get that extra promotion time, or you kind of have to front load all of your work. And the challenge is, once you get your first book out, it's that old schedule problem that I talked about a while ago. You're on issue 3 or 4 of orders before you really start getting in-store customer feedback. So it's just not good. Now, you can always get additional orders, but that then is if there are extra copies at at Diamond's warehouse, and at the small indie level, that's close to zero. You can also kind of arrange to deliver some extra copies to Diamond yourself, but that is I've actually heard from a number of small publishers, small creators who did that, and then their books went nowhere. They just got lost, and just it was basically it's like throwing books out the window. So it's screwy. It benefits the biggest, it hurts the lowest, and again, the biggest have other ways to market and promote, so they need this service arguably the least. The groups that need Final Order Cutoff abilities, and just as much time as humanly possible, are the tiny up and comers, and of course they're the ones who don't get it. So that's another screwy aspect of this whole thing. And so as some videos have been made of hey, retailers are stuck with these unsellable books, on some level, there is definitely some responsibility on the retailers, because they do have an extra opportunity to cut their line and cut their orders. And that's one of the cases, by the way, when you see a title get canceled prematurely, or what feels like prematurely, like Future Foundation gets canceled by issue 2. Some of that is because they're looking at the Final Order Cutoff numbers, and they're seeing a lot of people reduce their numbers. Like they were expecting, 5,000 books ordered, and then Final Order Cutoff hits, and 2,000 books get removed from that list. And that's usually a really clear sign. Marvel in particular looks at that and uses it as a gauge to how to cancel books. And so when you see a book getting canceled very, very quickly, it's usually that scenario going on. But I mentioned one other way this goes wrong. The other way it goes wrong is the retailers themselves, who tend to, you have a window for Final Order Cutoff. Like for example, right now I can log in and I can amend my orders right at this moment. But a lot of retailers wait until, say, Monday afternoon to do this, the day of the deadline, and they screw it up. And Diamond has some notorious problems with servers going down and sites being inaccessible and everything else. And that's bad on Diamond's fault. They should keep their machines up. But you can't beat up on them too much, because anyone who waits until the last possible second for this very critical aspect of their business is kind of asking for trouble. And that is a common story. It's a common story in both cases, where people will come in to complain about the servers going down or the deadline passing or various problems hitting or losing their work or all the rest. There's been articles about that, lots of posts to retailer groups about that, but usually an equal number or more of other retailers going, hey, Demas, why did you wait until the last possible second to do your order? That's kind of stupid. At any rate, that's what final order cutoff is. That's why it matters. And, for you as a customer, it's an important date to actually kind of understand, because if you want something reserved for you, and in particular, if it's a hot issue or a variant issue, knowing the final order or cutoff date can help you basically determine if you're going to get this comic or not. So it's good data for you as well to know, just as a customer. If you can go to Previews World and other sites, the what's available and what the dates are for final order cutoff are open. FOC, you can see it as a customer. You can see what's there yourself if you do a little bit of digging. So just like bookmarking, Previews World, or some of these other sites can be handy if you find yourself missing out on comics from time to time. At any rate, hope that was helpful. That's what it is. A bit of a boring topic, but the more you know, and knowing is half the battle, is what I always say. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, throw them in the comments below. Corrections, additions, details, bring it on. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. But most importantly, thanks for listening.